Time travel in Attack on Titan isn't about flashy DeLoreans or alternate timelines. It's a tragic loop where the future influences the past and freedom is just an illusion. But here's the thing. AOT's approach is far more deliberate than you might think. While time travel in fiction usually can be broken down into 8 distinct types, Hajime Isayama zeroes in on just one.
You have to
seeing
see this through.
The future.
Complete your mission and save Mikasa and Armin.
Mikasa? Armin? Who are they?
I don't know. They aren't from my memories.
Aaron's visions of a doomed fate drive him to rebel against it, only to become the very architect of that destruction, flattening 80% of the world in a twisted act of salvation. So why did Isayama choose this type of time travel over, say, ReZero's respawns or Steins Gate's branching timelines? And how does this singular, deterministic approach elevate Attack on Titan from a great story to a legendary tragedy? If you are here for deep dives like this, hit subscribe, drop a like, and consider supporting us on Patreon for early access to 2 videos in advance. Now, let's unravel the paradox. So, as I said before, Attack on Titan is deliberate in the kind of story it is telling, and Isayama picked carefully how he wanted to use time travel. Unlike, say, Back to the Future or Steins Gate, examples I used earlier, Attack on Titan follows a closed-loop model of time travel, meaning that the future is already set, and any attempts to change it only ensure that it happens. Some of you may have comparisons which come to mind, as famously the Terminator franchise uses a deterministic closed loop, and as for Isayama, he uses it so effectively. I would say just as good as, say, the first 2 Terminator films did, just as an example. But getting into the nitty-gritty of how this works, we can observe the key mechanics of this closed loop around 3 things which happen in the story. Because Isayama was very careful to ground the use of this time travel in the narrative itself. Something that is bold. The Attack Titan's power is one of these key aspects. It has the ability to send memories to past inheritors, allowing, say, Eren to influence Grisha, his own father. Then we have the paths, or the paths dimension, depending on what you label it as. This is a timeless space where the past, present, and the future coexist in one realm where the sands of time are the very foundation you walk upon. This is important because within the paths is Ymir, who is the founding Titan, and thus she is unique in that she can manipulate events across time, eras, and generations. You can see this quite clearly in the first episode when Ymir in the future, episode 80 to be exact, sends memories back to a younger Eren. And then there is the most important one of the 3. Of course, I am talking about the concept of determinism versus free will. Now for this video, we will only be focusing on how this applies to the core character of Attack on Titan, Eren Yeager. The main example here is that Eren sees the future because it is a fixed timeline, a closed loop, and his choices are already part of the timeline, meaning he can't change them, but only delay them. When Grisha hesitates to kill the Reese family, future Eren's influence forces his hand, proving that in Attack on Titan, time isn't a line, it's a knot. Now, when I was writing this script, I nearly forgot about this one aspect that is in pretty much every single time travel story. It's a concept that may be one of the reasons time travel stories are as popular and frustrating as they are. Looking at you, BioShock Infinite. Of course, I would be an idiot to not mention the grandfather paradox and how this affects the story of Attack on Titan. In most time travel stories, the main issue in most is with the grandfather paradox, which, to put that in simple terms, is the idea that if you go back in time and kill your own grandfather, then you're never born. I feel like Isayama wanted to avoid this issue entirely, as it can make an otherwise great setup quite messy, so he tactically sidesteps it because the timeline in Attack on Titan is a closed loop and thus cannot be changed. This further cements the idea that Eren doesn't change the past, he's actually the one to fulfill the past or the future. In fact, Isayama dedicates one of the series' top 10 moments for most fans just to address this issue, when Eren and Zeke go through the paths as a way for Zeke to prove to Eren that Grisha isn't a good man and that his plan of euthanizing all of the Eldians using the power of the Founding's gene manipulation is the best possible path forward. Isayama wanted to specifically make sure that the viewer knows one thing after Zeke reunites with Grisha for the first time through the powers of the paths, that the horror of predestination is upon them in their final hours. Eren is no hero. Eren is not rewriting the future. He's breaking fate. He's a slave to his own fate, a predetermined journey through one loop that will never stop. This one simple change to a closed loop instead of, say, a branching timeline or just something that has no basis in logic like a butterfly effect kind of thing makes Attack on Titan a deterministic story that takes the hopeful, bright-eyed boy who wanted to change the future, a slave to his own fate, to his own destiny, because he can't change the future. The future has already been determined, and he's the only one who knows what that determination is. The world will end by the hands of himself, a man who tried to save everyone from it. Even his idea of freedom is an illusion, because in a deterministic world, his actions were never truly his own. Why does this concept of time matter so much to Attack on Titan? And why is it so integrated into the very fabric? Well, first we must understand that time travel is not, in this series at least, a sci-fi gimmick to appeal to a wider audience or tell a story that is easier for Isayama to set up. It's actually the opposite and is the ultimate expression of the series' core themes. I'll give you 3 really good examples of what I mean, just to be consistent. The cycle of hatred is one of Attack on Titan's main themes and messages. Just as Eldia and Marley are trapped in vengeance, time itself is a loop no one can escape from. We see it time and time again, starting from the very beginning when Ymir was chosen by fate to free the pigs and eventually be cursed by the power of the Titans. This would give birth to a cycle of hatred like no other. Eldia and Marley forever locked into a never-ending war that would culminate in the crumbling of the Eldia Empire, leading to Marley deciding to wipe out Eldia once and for all, thousands of years later. And we saw how it affected Marley. The Titan Shifters, as an example, are just like the generations of Marley shifters before them, stuck in their own loop that starts from birth. Reiner is stuck, constantly feeling like he is a failure as an Eldian because his father left him. So he feels the only way to stop this cycle is to reject his own identity as an Eldian. This complex strikes deep into Reiner's motives as he constantly, over and over again, toils and repeats the same mistakes instead of just giving up and turning around. He can't. Because he knows that if he fails here, then his dream of making his mother happy, bringing his family back together, and obviously not being hated by himself and others for just who he is, will be just dreams. And he can't have that. He can't give it up. And so, he subjects himself to a torturous loop that only serves to make him lesser than.
違う違うんだよ俺はあの日マルセルが食われて兄とベルトルトは作戦を中止して引き返そうとしたのにでもね俺は二人を無理やり説得して死んだこさせたんだマルセルが必要だな俺は英雄になりたかった誰かに尊敬されたかったよりによってガキを戦士に俺が悪いんだよお前の母親が巨人に食われたのは俺のせいだ
The second major example is the illusion of free will in Attack on Titan. Characters often believe they have an agency in their own fate. And in many ways, you can look at that illusion of free will like a play, which Isayama also used in the lead-up and conclusion to the Declaration of War, one of the most significant events in all of the series, may I add. But characters are more or less just characters, playing out a script written by fate. Which is literally true, because Isayama wrote it, and that's something I didn't realize while making this video was there's a bit of that meta aspect of Attack on Titan. But that's also a big reason why the final season has such a drastic and dark tonal shift from the first 3 seasons. We can see this visually with the first 3 seasons having a largely blue and green, very lush color tone. Well, in the final season, things have a much muddier and browned tint to everything. No doubt a direct thematic allusion to the Titans stomping everything into mud, which, mud is often used in time travel stories as a way to show that we all come from the mud of time, like sands through the hourglass. Every single character in Attack on Titan is simply replaying events that had happened centuries ago, falling into the same traps, the same hatred, the same outcomes, and the same conclusions, all to just repeat it in a doomed loop. No character has a say in what happens because it's been decided by the very nature of humanity itself. This then brings us to Ymir. Not Freckles Ymir, but Ymir Fritz. Ymir's entire character is based upon an eternal curse that she then projects onto history itself, dooming it to repeat a vicious cycle. The founder, who has been waiting for 2,000 years within paths because their time is meaningless, until Eren frees her by ensuring his own past actions. In other words, Eren is assuring to Ymir that he can break the eternal curse of Ymir by carrying it to its natural conclusion, which is the deterministic outcome in which Eren destroys as much as he possibly could. In essence, Ymir Fritz wasn't waiting to be freed by breaking through the loop. Ymir was waiting for the person who could destroy everything and embrace the loop, end her suffering, right? Because she knew that the only way to stop the cycle of hatred and the cycle of her pain was to embrace it and let it play out. Only then, after everything is flattened and done, can the rebuilding process begin, and through that rebuilding process, the mistakes of the past can be changed at a core foundation. Yet, Ymir's very concept as a character is also a contradiction as well. Ymir represents the loop of humanity itself. Just because Eren was able to essentially eliminate the basis for the previous cycle of hatred, a new one is guaranteed to start again. Because fate has determined from the very beginning that humanity is doomed to a fate of destruction. Eren's despair comes from knowing he's both the villain and a prisoner of time, making Attack on Titan's time travel one of the most strangest in this particular fiction. but also a double-edged sword. Because as seen in the end to Attack on Titan, people can learn from mistakes and change aspects of themselves, and thus how time plays out. The details, the minutia. Gabby and Falco could literally solve hatred, racism, and world hunger. Those things are not decided by destiny. However, the ultimate fate of destruction is inevitable even then. In other words, destruction is just as guaranteed as peace is, just as the wind blows and the sun rises in the morning. It's a curse every human carries knowing their demise. Because nothing lasts forever, all good things must come to an end. But the important part is knowing that you can, in the face of fate, still create a better world. So that when the doomed timeline reaches its conclusion, the outcome isn't 80% of the world being flattened, but something better that accepts who we are, but rebuilds nonetheless. What makes Attack on Titan's time travel so brilliant is that it doesn't just service the plot. It is the plot. The story was never about changing the world, it was about realizing no one ever could. In the end, Eren's power wasn't to control time, it was to see how little control anyone truly had. That the determinism of time itself dooms humanity to a tragic fate just like Eren Yeager, Grisha Yeager, and Eren Kruger, and every single Titan throughout history and those who would come after in the after credits to AOT's ending. But I also believe that while the tragedy of this doomed fate is very dark, and rooted into the genetics of humanity itself as humans thrive through conflict, the message I want to convey to the viewer watching right now is that fate has been determined. But what are we going to do about it? Because while it is easy to give up in the face of conflict and resign ourselves to what seems to be a predetermined fate, what we must realize is that we can control when that fate arrives. We can make sure that humanity, like how Eren Yeager achieved in the end credits for Attack on Titan, that for generations humanity can thrive to the point where we can build super advanced cities. One where nobody probably has to starve, die from disease, or suffer from hatred. These things are not determined. These things are the details and the minutia. These are just symptoms of humanity's fate and can be treated just like a cold. To me, this is what Eren realized and why he went forward with what he did, besides just making sure his family lived the rest of their lives as happy as possible. Because he knew they were doomed, but he saw the silver linings of what came after. I think he knew that in the dust of that doomed timeline that from the ashes humanity could be reborn and learn from its mistakes, that they are all doomed to repeat it in one way or the other. It's a contradiction, but that is the point of life itself. Existence is a contradiction in a universe populated by dead rock, but it's us, the conscious rock, that defies what it means to just be another voidless and dead stretch of space. Humanity really is built to learn upon it. Upon its mistakes, I should say. That's how we are wired. Destruction is built into each and every one of us, but I ask, wouldn't you want to build rather than destroy so that we can take the Falco and Gabbies of our world and create like a better tomorrow, or resign ourselves to destiny in the face of a hopeless destruction? I don't know. I think I know what I'm picking. And that is what is so great about Attack on Titan's concept of time travel. It really does make you think in a way that is conducive to the overall human experience. The closed loop is a cycle just like the cycle of hatred, or the cycle of killing, or whatever it may be in Attack on Titan. Still though, I think I'm picking the building thing. Definitely not the destruction part. Oof. So, what did you think of Attack on Titan's time travel? Was it a masterpiece of a tragic storytelling, or did it leave you with more questions and disappointment? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives.